Ooh, looking forward to this one for quite some time. Together We Roared. Now joining me, the two men behind Together We Roared, Steve Williams, of course, who caddied for Tiger Woods throughout a lot of his illustrious career, and Evin Priest, author extraordinaire. Gentlemen, welcome to Golf Talk Canada.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks for having us on your show.
Thanks, Adam. Good to be on, mate.
Yeah, it's great to see both of you here. And Steve, starting with you, just what kind of reaction have you received now that the book's been out for a couple months?
Yeah, look, it's been pretty overwhelming, really, to have so many different people that do podcasts and different people that are journalists that I know. I reach out and be on their show, but everyone that's been podcasts that we've done, and obviously they've read the book. Yeah, it's been pretty overwhelming, and like big thanks to Evan for that. He wrote the book. I mean, it's my story, or partly my story, and but Evan wrote the book, and that's the whole success behind it, is how the book's written and how the person gets really enthralled. Like, I try to describe it like a backstage pass that Evan's written that gives a person a very detailed look into what it was like during, arguably one of the greatest periods of golf. So, yeah, from my perspective, it's been great. What about you, Evan?
Yeah, that's very flattering, Steve. It's very much they're your stories, and it's very nice of you to say. But yeah, I guess it was the perfect marriage of Steve is the main character, incredible experience, once in a lifetime experience that he had, and he had found a writer in me that he told the story that the exact way that he wanted, which was full of nostalgia, full of gratitude that he was a part of such a special chapter in sports history. But at the same time, I wanted to flesh out. The average person may think that caddies don't have that much of a contribution to someone as sublimely talented as Tiger Woods, but from my experience, from what I've gleaned from Steve, and from what I've spoken to other great players, that Steve's contribution to Tiger's performance was very tangible, very measurable, and there are certain shots where you could say if Steve wasn't there, I don't know if Tiger makes that putt or hits that wedge close, or so it's he genuinely added to Tiger's majors tally. I firmly, heart on heart, believe that, and it was really fun to kind of flesh that out. Like peel the curtain back on Tiger Woods and explore something that really genuinely contributed to his performance, and that was Steve Williams. So it was a lot of fun. To be honest, like the most enjoyable part was just the twice weekly phone calls with Steve. It was probably as unserious as a author interview regular sort of schedule that you could ever have, because we were just laughing the whole time basically. And he was walking down memory lane as I was sort of guiding him down memory lane, and it was just a lot of fun to put together. We both kind of had some post book depression once the tools were down. We were like, oh, that was kind of fun. So yeah, I'm glad it's out there for the world to experience. It's doing really well. So that was a lot of fun.
Well, guys, as you know, this year on Golf Talk Canada, we're doing a whole special on Tiger Woods as we look back at his 2000 season, the greatest we've ever seen in PGA Tour history. Steve, for you, what are some of your fondest memories looking back at that magical 2000 season?
Yeah, when you get the opportunity in one season, Adam, to know in advance that you're going to be caddying at St Andrews and Pebble Beach, two of the most storied golf courses with so much history. And every major championship is valuable, but I think when it's at St Andrews and when it's at Pebble Beach, there's like an asterisk beside it, because you join such an elite lot of golfers, and particularly St Andrews. There's so much history there. But the thing that probably stands out more to me is that Evan and I looked at this closely in the book. Every player that wins a major championship, the second one's the hardest to win. And Tiger was absolutely no different in that respect. If you look at a couple of great players that come to mind quickly, Adam Scott and Justin Rose, two absolutely wonderful players that haven't won a second major, and given their ability, the way they play, the way they handle pressure, you would think they would have won more than one major. So, and Tiger was no different. And now in 1999, having not won since his breakthrough win at the Masters, if he hadn't have won the PGA Championship at the completion of 99, who knows what would have happened in 2000, because he would have gone, that long period between August in 99 to April in 2000, the same thing, trying to win that second major championship. So, obviously, Evan and I covered that in the book. I think that was a big moment in his career, massive moment in his career, because he had a 5-shot lead and it dwindled right down to 1-shot lead. Had he have not got over the line there, who knows what his career would have been. I think that was, in my opinion, the defining moment in Tiger's career. But then you go on to St Andrews or Pebble Beach to start with. Obviously an unbelievable feat, Adam, to win a major championship by 15 shots. It's kind of hard to comprehend that in today's world, or even back then, with a number of great players, a guy could do that. And then he moved on to St Andrews, and in my experience or my time with Tiger, that was the best 72 hole performance that he did in the 13 years I came from. Like the overall 72 holes, that was his best performance. And amazingly, at the very end of the championship, at the Open Championship at US Open at Pebble Beach, after Tiger signed his scorecard, there was a little discussion about an incident that happened there. And the second thing that he said to me was, Steve, I want you to get your ass over to St Andrews. I want you to know every blade of grass on that course, because I'm going to play better than I did this week. And that just gives you a look into a guy, what he's thinking. This is a guy that's a remarkable player and everything. That's how he thought. I mean, he's just won the US Open by 15 shots, an unbelievable performance. And now the first thing he's doing is thinking about St Andrews, I'm going to play better, because it's, obviously he won it by 15, but he wasn't happy the way he played a couple of holes. Obviously the third hole Saturday, where he made a triple and a couple of other holes. That wasn't a complete 72-hole performance, and he always spoke about wanting to do it. Well, St Andrews was a 72-hole performance, so not hitting it in one bunker around St Andrews, that, Evan, what a grand scale of things that is to accomplish. So, playing on two historic courses and completing two historic performances in the same year, back-to-back tournaments, was amazing.
It really was. And I mean, you sort of touched on it, maybe glanced over it there a little bit, but the incident that happened, for those who haven't heard the story, Steve, take us through what happened that Saturday morning at Pebble Beach when the restart happened and you happened to go into Tiger's golf bag and there weren't that many golf balls. Fill us in from there.
Yeah, look, we go into Evan's covered that off very, very well in the book, and it's something that Tiger and I laughed about for years. And look, just in a brief nutshell, Friday there was a fog delay, and we were to come back on Saturday morning, and it was an earlier start than what the players had anticipated, and given the nature of the way where the putting green was, where the driving range was, and where the vehicles that were going to take you out to the tee that you were starting on, where they were located, there was not time to do all his normal routine, given that the tee off, I believe it was 7:30 in the morning, and there wasn't time to do what his normal routine was. So he elected not to putt. He just went from, I met him in the morning at his hotel room. We went to the driving range, and then we went from the driving range to out to the 14th tee there, and the 13th tee. And I picked the golf clubs up out of his room. It was a continuation of Friday's round. So, every day when you start the round, you make sure you got enough gloves, enough balls, and whatever other requirements you might need, wet weather gear, whatever it might be. So I just picked the bag up, put it on my shoulder, like it's just a continuation of yesterday's round. We don't need to change anything. Got out to the tee, and as we're standing on the tee, ready to go, I pull a ball. I put my hand in there, and there's only 3 balls in the bag. And I thought, now, how's that happen? There should have been 6, because I know there's still 6 in there from the day before. I wasn't too fussed about it. The very first hole up the hill there, hits it into the left rough, hits a sandwich out of the rough and scuffs up the ball, which was easy to do back in those days with new grooves and so forth. And Tiger threw that ball to a young junior young lad walking with his father, and the kid was just so excited. He's got a Nike ball with Tiger's name on it and that, and he's showing his dad, and he's just so excited. I almost wanted to go over and get that ball off him, just say, hey, come back on the 18th, I'll give it back to you. And you just couldn't do that. So now we've got 2 balls left. He plays 14, 15, 16, 17, and everything's going good. Standing on the 18th tee there with it, at this particular point in time, he was 9 shots ahead. He hits the first poor shot of the tournament and hits it out there into the water on the left side into the bay there. Now we're down to our last ball, and there was a very heated discussion on the tee as to, I'm wanting to hit an iron and just play safe. And anyway, he goes on to make a 6 and so forth. And the gist of the story was that Tiger, because he couldn't go to the putting green in the morning and do his normal routine, he putted on the carpet in his hotel room and he took 3 balls out of the bag, putted on the carpet, and I didn't see the ball sitting on the floor, and he didn't put them back in the bag. So we laughed about it for a long, long time. And, like Tiger, as he said, if I had hit that second one in the bay or out of bounds, whatever, he wouldn't still be here and I wouldn't still be here.
Yeah, it would have been a viral moment, Steve. Oh my God, that would have been crazy. I mean, Evin, for you, like for the average fan, for anyone picking up the book, to have the opportunity now to hear stories like this, like they watch their hero Tiger Woods set records that probably no one will ever break, but they don't know these behind the scenes stories. Just how exciting is that for you, man? Just as an author, as a fan of the game, like I know you are, for people to be able to read the work that you guys put together for inside scoop stories like the one Steve just told.
Yeah, Adam, it's a great question. I heard a quote from someone, I think it might have been Hughes Norton. He was on a podcast and he wrote a book about his time with IMG and being a golf agent. And there was a famous golf journalist who said, if we don't get these stories down now, they'll sort of be lost forever. And, if we didn't write this book now, who's to say that Steve doesn't sort of pen these thoughts down and these incredible stories that he just mentioned? And the story he just mentioned is a prime example of the book is chock full of either brand new information and brand new stories from the bowels of Steve's memory, or just a new light and a new insight into a moment that we all know. Like, Steve's told the story before about the lost balls, and it doesn't get any worse. It just gets better every time he tells it. But at the same time, what we didn't know about that is that he didn't tell Tiger about the balls until after the tournament. So Tiger played the 3rd and 4th rounds, won the tournament. And then after that, he said, Steve, what the hell was going on Saturday morning? And that's when Steve said, he goes, why didn't you tell me? And Steve said, well, you never asked. So it's just moments like that where you just like, I know, you just laugh, you crack a smile, and it just gives you an extra appreciation for a story that you may be across if you're a super Tiger fan. If you're not, it's all brand new. And to answer your question, yeah, I mean, it's an absolute dream. Steve's someone I've looked up to my whole life. He was kind of like a parasocial connection to Tiger Woods as I was growing up watching golf. And I love rugby, and I used to watch games between the Australian Wallabies and the New Zealand All Blacks, and always had a great respect for New Zealand. And then once I got into golf, I thought, wow, Tiger's caddy is from New Zealand. That's so cool. It's kind of like a connection to Tiger. So I was always rooting for Steve. And then to sit down with him for 8 months and get all his thoughts spilling out onto a page and package that for him the way that he wants his legacy with Tiger to be known and remembered. It was just a dream come true, really.
100%. And Steve, next up on the majors in 2000, we've been through the U.S. Open at Pebble, obviously the Open at St. Andrews, the great duel in 2000, Tiger Woods and some guy named Bob May, who maybe a lot of people weren't aware of, but Tiger knew how good Bob May was and that he wasn't going to back down, right?
Yeah, look, it was I was actually quite aware of Bob May because, not oddly enough, but a New Zealander who was a friend of mine, Max Cunningham, was caddying for Bob May at the time. And unfortunately, Max didn't make the trip to Valhalla, which was a real shame. I would have got, it was an amazing battle, but it would have been meant more to me to be out with Max, my best mate. But for health reasons, he didn't make over. But anyway, it was interesting going into Sunday's round at Valhalla. And Tiger asked me, did I know much about Bob May? And I said, well, actually, I do a little bit because my friend Max cashed that. And he just said, Steve, I'll tell you one thing, he won't back down. And I found that interesting that a guy that, is unheralded in major play and hadn't had a lot of experience playing in majors, and certainly not being in the final group on Sunday. But in all honesty, in the entire time that I worked with Tiger, he was the guy that played 18 holes better than anyone else. Now, he's played, like Phil Mickelson, that front nine in the 2001 Masters when Tiger and him were going head to head. That front nine that Phil played was could have even been the best nine I've ever seen, to be fair. But Bob played 18 holes, never, ever backed down. It was incredible. And it was an incredible duel. And like Tiger had mentioned, he said, Steve, I know this guy from Southern California from my junior days now, and he won't back down. It was an incredible thing. And it was a very memorable week. Tiger was paired with Jack Nicklaus the first 2 rounds, which was another part of the book that Evin made the viewer or the reader very aware of. There's somewhat a lot of luck in the draw sometimes, because this was Jack's final major, his final time playing in the PJ. He's playing with Tiger, and it's almost as if Jack's going to pass the torch over to Tiger. And, you know, and that just gave Tiger, not that he needed any more incentive, but each time something like that happened, he rose to the occasion. He's playing with Jack Nicklaus in the first 2 rounds of a major championship. Well, he wants to show Jack how good he actually is and how good, you know, and a lot of that, and that was, you know, a very memorable time. And the thing that I always think about that one tournament, or that championship, was when the 72 holes completed and we're going off to the playoff. You know, Tiger had that tricky putt on the 18th hole, downhill, about a 9-footer, left to right. Probably the hardest putt to hole under pressure in golf. You know, it's not an uphill putt where you can bang it in. It's downhill and it's got to be precise in that. And I said to Tiger when we were driving on the golf cart out to the playoff hole, I said, "What were you thinking over that putt, Tiger?" Because I always love to ask him things like that. And I said, "And what were you thinking over that putt, Tiger?" And he just said, "My mum would make this putt. You're Tiger Woods. You're supposed to make it." You know,
Come on.
and there's a lot of little things like that in the book that, you know, like even in the playoff with Chris DeMarco at the Masters, and we were walking or riding out there, and, you know, I said to Todd, you know, I go, or Evin, we cover that in the book, just little things that you'd ask him, because it's very good to ask those little things, you know, because even as myself, you're the caddy for the player, but you're also a massive fan of the guy, how you could not be. And you're very privileged to be in a position where you can ask those little things, you know, and some of the answers Tiger get, you just, you know, and there's lots of little quotes like that in the book. You just think, wow.
Oh, well, speaking of wow quality quotes, I mean, we're here in Canada, so whenever we see the Canadian Open back on the telecast, we see the shot from the bunker at Glen Abbey, 210, 213 yards, the 6-iron. But Steve, I understand that you guys were driving the day before that final round, and Tiger said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, let's pull over on the side of the highway." What happened next?
So often when I was caddying for Tiger, I was the driver of the vehicle. You know, Tiger used to, at the end of the day, like to sit back and think about the round and process what had gone on and look forward to the next round and that. But he had a swing thought. We're driving on the QE2 freeway back to the hotel. He had a swing thought, and I had to pull the car over. We're on the side of the QE2 highway. He's got a 7-iron out of the bag, out of the trunk, and he's swinging on the side of the highway. Now you can imagine how many people are honking their horn, and what is the guy swinging a golf club on the side of the main highway? Only Tiger would do that. You know, he had a swing thought in his head, and he couldn't wait to get back to the hotel room. It had to be now. You know, Tiger was obsessed with the swing, as a lot of them are. And when you got a thought, he just had to act that thought out immediately. And, you know, that was on the Saturday driving back. And, you know, and he comes back on Sunday. Now, if you ask me what are Tiger's top 3 shots he's ever hit in the time that I came from, the final hole at the 2000 Canadian Open at Glen Abbey would be number 1 on my list. And the one out of the bunker at the 18th hole at in Minnesota there, Hazeltine, would be 2, and the chip in Augusta would be 3. So that was an unbelievable shot, you know, 213 yards out of a bunker with a 6-iron, heavy conditions, rain. And Adam, the most amazing thing was, it wasn't even that great a lie. I mean, there was absolutely zero chance. You know, it had to be, there was no error. You know, it had to be the best shot you ever hit, or it was going in the water. Yeah, and when you stand there and watch the guy execute that, you know, like I said, you know, you're a fan of the guy, even though you're working for the guy. You just stand there and you look at it, and you know, you don't shake your head, but inside your head, you're just shaking it. You're not, although your head's not moving, you just say, I can't believe the guy just pulled that off.
Yeah, oh my God. And Evin, it's so cool to hear Steve and to hear the amount of detail that this is from 25 years ago, right? So, Evin, for you, was there a word count max that you had to hit? Because it seems like a book that, with Steve talking about Tiger, could be about 1 million words long.
Yeah, I had lunch with the publisher in New York City a few months ago when the book came out, and I said I could have written 180,000 words, and he said, "Thank God you didn't." So, because to edit that is just an extraordinary task, and His name's Morrow from HarperCollins. He did an amazing job. So did the whole team. But yeah, like as a golf fan, and Steve's a golf fan, you could absolutely just geek out on every single detail. But we kind of had to keep it around the 90,000, 95. We ended up being 95,000 words. And there was just so much that there was quite a bit that we left on the cutting room floor. And it was sad for those moments to happen, but you just had to. So, but there's so many cool moments from Steve's perspective where he just sheds like sort of a backstage pass to that particular moment. He mentioned before, nobody really knows unless you were sort of there at the time. And even then you probably wouldn't have known, but he grew up caddying with a really close friend at Patapata Umu Beach in New Zealand. And that guy had to sit at home on the sidelines with some health issues at the time and watch his own regular player go into one of the greatest ever battles with Tiger Woods with a sort of fill-in caddy on the bag. And it's just like, wow, like there's such a strong connection to Steve wherever you slice it. It was so cool. And it was. I really had to resist temptation to make that book even longer because you do have to get it into a certain package of 95,000 words. But there's so much we could have told, and it was such a special thing to do with Steve.
100%. And guys, I know we're running short on time here, but Steve, I have to ask you, you've caddied all your life. You've caddied for some of the best players in the world, and you've seen some other incredible performances throughout your time caddying. But Tiger in 2000, is that the greatest stretch of golf you ever saw up close?
Oh, undoubtedly. In one calendar year, Adam, he was just so focused, so driven, and so motivated. Just the simple fact that the Open was at St Andrews, and that was a big tick for him. Obviously, he wanted to win the Open Championship. He singled that out as the world's greatest championship. And it's just got that asterisk when it's at St Andrews. If you look at the Open Championship in the years when the players that have won it at St Andrews, and then of course Pebble Beach. So over a calendar year of 12 months, unparalleled. And like you mentioned at the start of the show, probably no one will have a calendar season like that ever again. And I was privileged to be up close and watch it. It was a real privilege.
100%. You got to see some incredible moments happen in that 2000 season. And last one here, guys, before we sign off, something that I really loved throughout the book, and I know we're only touching on 2000, I wish we had more time, but was talking about those handwritten notes, Steve, that you and Tiger would give back and forth. When did these handwritten notes really begin?
Look, Adam, I'm very, very old school. And when I first went to caddy for Tiger, he couldn't believe I didn't have a cell phone. I had a flip phone. Sorry, I didn't, I had a flip phone sorry, I didn't even have a phone. And then when I got a phone, I got a flip phone. I'm very, very old school. That started right from the start with Tiger. And at the end of the day or something, sometimes I wanted to leave a note to him, a very special note that meant something to him, and I'd write that note. And generally I would put the clubs back in his hotel room. He might be off doing something else, and I would leave that there and leave the note with him. And then I'd come back the next day and pick the clubs up, and there'd be a return note. And those it became, it was a regular thing. And until the time came to read the book, I hadn't pulled those notes out. And it meant a lot to read those notes, those special messages that Tiger wrote, and Evin got to come into my memorabilia room and see a lot of the stuff that I've got on the wall there, and some of the photos are in the book there, and the notes that Tiger read. And the coolest thing about doing the book with Evin, is he, everybody knows that I'm a stand up, straight up sort of guy, and you tell it like it is, and I think, listening to the feedback that I've had from the book, people were so thrilled to hear, there's none of there's none of the stories that people don't want to hear about. It's just strictly, they can tell it's me because it's just straight up, straight to the point. But yeah, those notes, to get those out and read those was quite exciting, as writing the book with Evin, because when I was working with Tiger, it was so intense, and he was so driven to get that record of breaking Jack's major record. And look, I didn't look, you never look back. Tiger just constantly was looking forward, and that was the way I sort of operated at the same time too. That's the way he sort of not made you operate, but that's the way he thought. So you had to think along the same line. So it was the next major, next major, next major, as he tried to climb that ladder to, to tie at 18 and get above it at 19 and so forth. And to write the book with Evin and jolt my memory and go down, it was like going down memory lane. We're both pleased with the book. Evin done an amazing job, but for me, it's a great book for myself to have, because it's something that I can read back and jolt my memory. So it was great.
Yeah, and Evin, for you, like, did you know about these handwritten notes at all before this project began?
No, I can still picture where I was when Steve and I were doing the call. One of our twice weekly calls, and I just nearly fell off my chair. I said, "You and Tiger used to, I mean, Adam, a lot about the world of professional golf these days. So do I. Steve does as well, even though he doesn't caddy anymore. But that's just unprecedented. Like a player and caddy having that strong a relationship that they could give each other honest feedback, that they would take the time. Like professional golf these days is all about saving time and how can we be more efficient. And here is the world's greatest sports superstar and his caddy handwriting, taking the time to sit down and handwrite. And Steve noted that Tiger's handwriting was beautiful. It wasn't rushed. It was always really thoughtful. And he would read it over and over again and give Steve a really thoughtful response. And when Steve told me that, I was kind of like, Steve, did you just say that you and Tiger would handwrite notes to each other? And then, I was sort of pressing with follow-ups, and I said, what was the most memorable one? And we would just only tease it for the purpose of this interview. But sadly, Canadian was the victim of one of these Stephen Ames and the infamous 9 and 8 moment, which is obviously, pretty well known in golf circles. But again, Steve just peels the curtain back on that moment and adds this just incredible insight, not only to that moment, but to their entire relationship. And I just couldn't believe it. I think it was among my top 3 favorite revelations from Steve in the book to put into that book. And then not only that, once I actually went to Steve's house, as he just mentioned, it was almost emotional for me to walk into his sort of pool room and see this incredible shrine, not only to Tiger Woods, but to Adam Scott and Greg Norman and Raymond Floyd, to see these old bags, like staff bags from Titleist in 1999 and Nike in 2000, the Buick bag in 2000. And that's where I really realized that Steve wasn't just sort of looking back fondly on those handwritten notes. They were sitting there in living proof in some of the photos that Tiger signed for Steve, some of the handwritten messages on flags, the 18th green flag that he would give to Steve after they had won a major together. And I could see it with my own 2 eyes. Like, there is those handwritten notes in flag form, and they're sort of living on Steve's wall in his sort of golf museum. So that was just, it was, as a golf fan, that was like, I was speechless, really.
Together we roared. So many cool inside scoop stories, really, on Steve Williams' career caddying for Tiger Woods. Gentlemen, congratulations on this project. Like I mentioned earlier, I've already read it. I'm going to read it again on my honeymoon in the Amalfi somewhere next week under the sun. Looking forward to that. Thank you both so much for your time today. Really appreciate both of your insights, and would love to have you both on Golf Talk Canada again at some point soon.
Thanks again, Adam. And don't have your wife to be blame me when you don't put that book down.